As you may or may not have heard, Seth Rollins, aka Seth Trollins, has been lashing out on Twitter lately against anybody who's been critical of WWE in any way. But are his actions justified, or is he just a corporate stooge? Well, let's give it an honest look. Being the Universal Champion in one of the least popular times in WWE's recent memory's gotta be really frustrating, especially if it's not your fault. After all, when Eddie Guerrero was champion, he was pretty devastated when ratings and attendance were down. That was mainly due to the fact that The Rock, Steve Austin, Goldberg, and Brock Lesnar all just left the company. But even then, the ratings and attendance were still way higher than they are today. Traditionally, the champion's always been the most responsible person on the card for the good and the bad, even though that's not really the case these days. And without a doubt, Seth Rollins is definitely one of the hardest working and best wrestlers in the world today. So I'm sure it's gotta drive him crazy that all people seem to be talking about while he's the champion's how bad his company is and how great other pro wrestling companies are. But I don't think he should take the WWE criticism so personally, because I don't think anybody's blaming Rollins in particular for WWE's recent decline. I mean, people have been critical about things he's been a part of, like his match with Dean Ambrose last December that he himself admitted wasn't great. But no one's got anything against Rollins in particular, and for the most part, everyone would agree that he's part of the glue holding everything together. So while his frustrations are understandable, taking shots at other promotions and wrestlers just makes him come off as insecure. There's absolutely nothing wrong with him claiming WWE to be the best pro wrestling on the planet, except for the fact that he's calling it pro wrestling, because Vince McMahon constantly denies that's what they do. But be that as it may, calling Will Ospreay a little guy for taking exception to Rollins' claims that nobody else in the world does what he does just makes Rollins look like the little guy, especially when Ospreay never once takes any shots at Seth Rollins. All of Ospreay's responses have never put Rollins down in any way. All he's been doing is defending himself, and it's a bit hypocritical for Rollins to dislike his hard work being shot on, only for him to shit on other people's hard work. And I really don't buy into the idea of blaming fans for not liking your product. I could see how people would think it's weird to complain and keep watching, but the thing is that fewer and fewer people are watching every week, so even if Rollins personally likes the WWE product, there's really no denying that something needs a change. And it does absolutely nothing for him to bash other wrestlers, especially Ospreay in particular, because WWE's tried and failed to recruit him for themselves. And another thing that's just weird about Rollins belittling Ospreay's efforts is that he himself came from the same world. He even praised the famous Ospreay-Ricochet match from a few years ago, but then again, given that he told Ospreay Ricochet was a better version of him, he'd probably just claim Ricochet was the one who carried the match. And Ricochet's awesome, so I refuse to say anything bad about him. But Rollins' statements make it pretty obvious that he hasn't seen anything from Ospreay lately, because most of Ospreay's matches this year have been pretty goddamn incredible. Plus, he's looking pretty buff these days, so calling him a little guy just exposes Rollins' ignorance. Because according to Jericho, Ospreay's actually bigger than Rollins these days. Even if Rollins would argue that he's capable of putting matches on as good as Ospreay, the fact is that in 2019 he just hasn't been. Not that he's been terrible or anything, but he certainly doesn't have any right to bury Ospreay when his last big match at Stomping Ground got hijacked by the live crowd. And no, that wasn't the fans' fault, because they were actually into everything else that night, and I'd actually agree with Rollins in that it was a pretty good show. But if fans are hijacking shows or acting stupid, it's usually because there's something wrong with what they're being given. And even the night after WrestleMania, it's always completely avoidable. So rather than blaming fans who complain and still attend and watch the shows, you should try giving them a product they want. Because their complaining shows that they care and that they do want to give you a chance. If your wife tells you she doesn't like that you came home naked last night while high on meth, you probably shouldn't tell her to stop complaining. You should just be happy she didn't leave your sorry ass. Fans having a voice is a positive, not a negative. And I completely agree that companies should never listen to the vocal minority. But when everything's declining except for the TV deal and blood money from Saudi Arabia, then you should absolutely listen to the vocal majority. Sure, some fans are happy with WWE right now, and if that's you, then more power to you. But I guarantee that if they restructured the main roster to be a little more like NXT, then those same people would be happy, and many of the disgruntled fans who gave up would likely return. And even if that's not true, I know whatever they're doing now isn't working. So why not listen to fans instead of burying them in everything they like? When fans lashed out at the movie trailer for Sonic the Hedgehog, Paramount listened to the criticism and changed it. So it blows my mind that WWE's putting Baron Corbin in another main event at Extreme Rules. And look, I'm not on the bandwagon of thinking Baron Corbin's the worst thing ever. I actually think he's a lot better than people give him credit for. But him being in the main event with his current character clearly isn't working. And it's not because fans aren't smart enough to comprehend how brilliant he is either. So the fact that Rollins is honestly trying to imply that his match that got hijacked is better than everything else in the world is just preposterous. Yes, WWE is the biggest wrestling/sports entertainment company in the world, but that doesn't mean that they're currently the best, it just means that they used to be. And look, the current WWE roster from top to bottom might have more talent than the rest of the world combined. All it would take is a little bit of tweaking and they'd easily be the best in the eyes of all the so-called dorks on the internet as well. After all, no one's complaining about NXT. But again, at this moment, a lot of fans whose opinions WWE ought to care about don't think it's the best show in the world right now, even if it is by far the biggest. And look, I completely understand that WWE produces way more content than everybody else, but they also have a hell of a lot more people working there as well. so there really is no excuse that the 10 or so hours of programming they produce every week can't be amazing. Most fans complaining about the product are only doing so because they love it, otherwise it'd have been gone a long time ago. But wrestling fans can only endure so much before they walk away. So rather than just taking shots at the competition on Twitter, Rollins should be a big enough person to admit that the company he works for could be even better. Because taking shots at unhappy fans and the people they love just makes you come off as insecure and jealous. And as soon as you start bringing your bank account up to prove you're the best, you're basically admitting defeat. Especially when the people you're attacking consciously turn bigger paychecks down to be in companies whose popularity is increasing rather than decreasing. And aside from the shots taken at Will Ospreay, I think it's an even bigger dick move to say Dean Ambrose leaving because he's unhappy was him taking his ball and going home. It really just comes off as jealousy to see somebody he was so close to leave the WWE bubble and actually become more popular than he's ever been in just one night. In fact, everything Rollins has been saying is so weird and out of character that I honestly think it's possible Vince McMahon directly told him to take these shots. It's one thing to be a team player and claim the company you're champion for is the best, but the only conclusions I can come to is that Seth Rollins is either a corporate shill, he was straight up told to bury all wrestling outside of WWE, or he's probably gonna turn heel soon and have a match with Roman Reigns. Because I'm sure there's a lot of fear within WWE that once Roman Reigns finally gets back into the title picture that fans are gonna reject him again. So if you're Seth Rollins and your job's to get Roman Reigns over as the next top babyface, then what better way is there for him to get heat than to convince fans he became a corporate shill? The hardcore fan base loves Seth Rollins, and while they've been easy on Roman Reigns lately, there is still a strong possibility that the crowd's eventually gonna turn on him. After all, one of the biggest reasons why fans hated Roman Reigns is because he was viewed as the corporate chosen one. So if you're Seth Rollins, a guy who came from the indies and fans have a lot of respect for, and your job is to get Roman Reigns over as the next top babyface, then what other way is there for him to get heat? If I'm right about this, then expect a lot more trolling from Seth Rollins in the near future. If I'm wrong though, then Seth Rollins is just kind of a dick. What do you think about Rollins taking all these shots lately, though? Is it a bad look for someone who's supposed to be the top babyface? Is he turning on a fan base that he'd already won over to earn points with the boss? Or do you think he's justified because he's the top guy in the biggest wrestling company in the world? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will respond to everybody. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already to prove to the world you're a sexy beast. And if you want to help this channel grow, then liking and sharing this video really does go a long way. My name's Kayfabe Cameron, and I'll see you next time.